تا به حال اشخاصی رو دیدید از کشتن کسی لذت بردن؟
Five high school students in Michigan are accused of throwing rocks off an overpass and killing a man.
تا حالا آدمایی رو دیدید که احساس میکردن خدای همه چیزن ولی جلوی قانون به التماس افتادن؟
When we think of teenagers, images of youthful rebellion and awkward growth spurts will often come to mind. But what happens when this turbulent phase takes a dark turn?
تا حالا انسان‌هایی رو دیدید که از تیکه تیکه کردن بقیه لذت بردن؟
They don't show any empathy, any sympathy, any remorse, any guilt.
Imagine teenagers whose actions leap far beyond typical mischief, landing squarely in the realm of the macabre and horrifying.
تو این ویدیو اومدید با شیطانی ترین جوانهای جهان که از کشتن لذت بردن. به نام یزدان پاک سلام عرض میکنم خدمت شما دوستای گلم، خانواده عزیزم. خیلی خوش آمدید به چنل خودتون. کاپیتان وحشت سهیل هستم در خدمت همه شما. بچه‌ها اومدیم با یک ویدیوی هیجان انگیز از ویدیویی که حتی شبکه‌های خبری آمریکا به اون پوشش دادن و توی شبکه‌های خبر پخش شده. پس با هم بریم ببینیم امشب چی در انتظارمونه. ولی قبلش لایک، کامنت و سابسکرایب یادتون نره. دکمه زنگوله رو بزنید تا از ویدیوهای جدید ما با خبر بشین و بیاین ببینید و وقتی جواب کامنتاتون رو میدیم بفهمید جاتون اینجاست. عشقی عشق از ایران. بریم تو ویدیو آهسته و با ترس.
Daniel William Marsh, A Nightmare Unfolds. Daniel William Marsh's story is a reminder that sometimes the most unsettling horrors are not found in fiction, but in the grim reality of human action. Born into an apparently normal life, his childhood seemed unremarkable at first, but beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. From as early as 10 years old, he exhibited signs of violent and antisocial behavior. As he grew, these tendencies intensified, morphing into dark fantasies about torture and murder, despite seeking help from numerous doctors and experimenting with various medications. Nothing had seemed to alleviate his disturbing thoughts. The night of April 13th, 2013 would mark a catastrophic shifting in his life. That evening, he had meticulously planned a heinous action that would shock the entire community. Dressed in black with his shoes taped up, he resembled a character from a crime thriller, but this was no fiction. The randomness of his choice sent shivers down the spine. Marsh had roamed the streets until he spotted an open window, which led him to the home of Oliver Northrop Jr. and his wife. Inside, he lurked in the shadows of their bedroom, watching the couple sleep, and the next moments became a blur of violence. He attacked, unleashing a fury of stabs upon the unsuspecting couple, the brutality of his actions unthinkable. Over 60 stab wounds each. However, his depravity did not end with the murders. He then continued his assault post-mortem, dismembering and experimenting on their bodies in a grotesque display of humanity. The level of savagery left even seasoned investigators shocked. The insertion of objects into the victims' bodies, a twisted signature that seemed to come from the darkest corners of a disturbed mind. In the aftermath of the crime, his ability to return to normalcy would be disturbing as the action itself. He bragged to friends about the murder, even showing off the bloody knife as a grotesque trophy. It's this brazen disregard for life and eerie detachment from the gravity of his actions that chills you to the bone. Eventually, his friends were unable to bear the weight of the secret and reported him, leading to his arrest. During interrogations, he would deny the crimes, but as the hours went by, he confessed, describing the murders as being exciting and exhilarating. How can one reconcile such words with the brutal reality of their actions? In September of 2014, at the age of 17, he would face trial. His defense pleaded insanity, but a psychiatrist deemed him to be mentally ill yet sane. And the verdict was a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 52 years. The case of Daniel William Marsh is a harrowing journey into the depths of human depravity, forcing us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of evil and the capacity for darkness in youth. His story is a grim reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear the most can be found much closer to home, hiding in plain sight among us. Nicholas Cruz.
60 ضربه چاقو زد و تیکه تیکه کردشون، روش آزمایش انجام داد رو اون زن مرد بند بدبخت و هیچ ابراز پشیمونی هم نکرد، حتی رفت با افتخار برای دوستاش هم تعریف کرد، همونطوری که تو زیرنویسا خوندید. حالا من اینو برای کسایی میگم که زیرنویس مثلا زیاد متوجه نشدن. من این ویدیو رو خودم ندیدم از قبل و الان دارم میبینم. کسی حرفشو باور نکرد. چاقو رو که نشون داد تازه به خیلی‌ها اثبات شد که نه، این واقعا این کارو کرده. دوستاش رفتن نتونستن این رازو نگه دارن. نباید هم این رازو نگه داشت، چون کسی که یک بار این کارو کنه باز هم این کارو انجام میده. به پلیسا گفتن و گرفتنش و واقعا شیطان بعضی موقع‌ها به نظر من درس پس میده جلوی بعضی آدما.
Tragedy at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High. Nicholas Cruz's name will forever be linked with one of the most devastating school shootings in American history. His story is a tragic amalgamation of missed warnings, mental health issues, and a society that's grappling with gun violence, and it unfolded in the hallways of the high school in February of 2018. It was a day that would shatter the illusion of school safety, leaving a scar on the nation's consciousness. Cruz's journey to that day would be marked with turbulence and warning signs that in hindsight were glaringly obvious. From a young age, he had struggled with his behavior. Diagnosed with ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder, his childhood was a carousal of shifting schools and escalating problems. His fascination with guns became evident early on, a chilling harbinger of the tragedy he would later inflict. His social media presence was a window into his troubled soul. Racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and xenophobic rants all painted a picture of a teenager consumed with hatred and violence. It's disturbing to think of a young mind so ensnared in darkness that the only escape seemed to be through an act of unspeakable violence. The shooting at the high school was not an impulsive action. It was the culmination of deeply troubled life. Cruz, armed with an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle, which he had legally purchased, methodically planned the attack. He knew the layout of the school, and the familiarity added an even more sinister layer to his actions. He would unleash it.
خیلی جالبه یه اسلحه نیمه خودکار رو بری قانونی بخری. تو مملکتی که اسلحه آزاد باشه، من یکی از قانونایی که تو آمریکا باش مشکل دارم همینه. یعنی به نظر من توی یک کشور نباید اسلحه آزاد باشه بچه‌ها. شاید خیلی‌ها بگن نه اسلحه خوبه، آدم از خودش محافظت میکنه، بغل دستت هستی که کسی بهت حمله کرد میزنی میکشی. خب دیگه همین فقط کسی حمله کرد نیست، یه لحظه جنون بهت دست میده میزنی یکی رو میکشی، بعد میفهمی ای بابا چی کار کردم. هر کی با هر کی دشمنی پیدا کرد اسلحه در میاره میزنه میکشه. واسه همینه که تو آمریکا قتل زیاده و خیلی راحت یه مسلسل نیمه خودکار مثلا انگار بری کلاشینکوف بخری، خیلی راحت آزادانه بری بخری بیاری.
Torrent of bullets killing 17 people and wounding 17 others in a rampage that lasted mere minutes but felt like an eternity. The aftermath was a time of grief, anger, and desperate search for answers. How could this have happened? How could it have been prevented? The community of Parkland was plunged into mourning with vigils and memorials, springing up to honor those whose lives were brutally cut short. Parents, students, and more all grappled with the unimaginable, trying to piece together a semblance of normalcy in a world that had irrevocably changed. Cruz's actions would spark a national conversation about gun control, mental health, and school safety, and students from the high school, propelled by their grief and outrage, became advocates for gun reform, leading to nationwide protests and challenging policymakers. Their voices were strong and unwavering, echoing across the country and demanding change in a system that had failed to protect them. In the legal aftermath, Cruz's fate would be sealed. In November of 2022, he received 34 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. These charges would reflect all 34 of his victims and the heinous actions he had done that day upon them. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of the tragedy is trying to understand that it could have been prevented. In the years that led up to the shooting, numerous warning signs were either missed or ignored. Calls to authorities about his behavior, threats of violence, disturbing social media posts, they were all not enough to trigger a decisive intervention. This oversight raised troubling questions about the gaps in the system and the ease with which potential warning signs could be overlooked. The story of Nicholas Cruz and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School is more than just a tale of a troubled teen and a tragic event. It's a reflection of the complex interwoven issues that society faces today. It underscores the urgent need for effective mental health support, responsible gun ownership, and proactive intervention strategies. In the end, the legacy of this tragedy extends beyond the confines of Parkland, Florida. It serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable among us. Gregory Ramos, a fatal argument over grades. The story of Gregory Ramos is a tale that begins not with a sinister plot, but with a common household argument, one about his grades. Yet what transpired in Ramos's household in November of 2018 was anything but common. It was a horrifying act of violence that would leave the community and the nation reeling in disbelief. Ramos was just 15 years old, an age where teenage angst and parent-child conflicts are expected. However, the confrontation between Ramos and his mother over a D grade that he received at school would spiral into an unfathomable tragedy. The argument reached its peak in the late hours of the night. In a fit of rage, Ramos had strangled his mother with his bare hands, a harrowing action of violence that lasted over 30 minutes. The thought of a son taking the life of his own mother in such a manner is deeply unsettling. After committing the murder, he displayed a cold and calculated demeanor, which was far removed from the expected shock or remorse, placing his mother's lifeless body in a wheelbarrow and then into the family van. The ordeal does not end there, though. He drove around with his mother's body before deciding to bury it behind a church. This action raises a lot of questions about his state of mind. What goes through the brain of a teenager?
با جسد مادرش رفت و آمد کرد. فهمیدین یعنی چی؟ واو
As he drives around with his own mother's corpse in the back of a van. After burying the body, he then returned home and enlisted the help of two friends to make it look as though a burglary had occurred. They had complied, unaware of the grim reality of the situation. When the police would arrive at his residence following a 911 call placed by Gregory himself, they would be met with a fabricated story of a robbery and his mother having gone missing. Initially, authorities bought into the narrative. However, they soon grew suspicious as inconsistencies began to emerge. Upon further questioning, the facade crumbled, and he then confessed to the murder. The trial of Gregory Ramos was a somber affair. He would be tried as an adult, pleading guilty to first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. And his sentence was a staggering 25 years in prison, with a review set after the completion of that term. After that, Ramos may qualify for lifetime probation. The gravity of his sentence speaks volumes about.
بچه‌ها منظورم این نیست 25 سال کمه ها، نه یه عمره، ولی برای همچین جنایتی 25 سال زندان. خب طرف اصلا اینا نباید دیگه آزاد شن. واقعا اینا دیگه نباید آزاد شن و به جامعه برگردن. اینجور آدما کسی که به مادر خودش رحم نمیکنه واقعا.
About the severity of his actions. The involvement of his friends added another layer of complexity to the case. Charged with being accessories after the fact of first-degree murder, they had faced their own legal battles for their roles in the aftermath of the crime. Ramos's plea to the judge to be lenient with his friends highlighted a glimmer of remorse, a late acknowledgement of the gravity of his actions. His case forces everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about the capacity for extreme violence in youth, challenging notions of familial bonds and the sanctity of the parent-child relationship. The fact that a dispute over something as common as school grades could lead to such a violent ending is a sobering reminder of the unpredictability of human behavior. In reflecting upon this tragedy, it's crucial to consider the more broad implications. What can be learned from a case about understanding and addressing the complex emotional needs of a teenager? How can families and communities better support young people in order to prevent such tragedies in the future? The case of Gregory Ramos is not only a story of a teenager who committed the unthinkable, it's a wake-up call about the depths of despair and rage that can exist in the adolescent psyche. A tragic reminder of the importance of communication, empathy, and support in navigating the often turbulent waters of teenage years. As everyone grapples with the aftermath of tragedies like these, it is essential to look beyond the sensational headlines and seek a deeper understanding of the factors that could drive a young person to such extremes. It's only then that we can hope to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Kyle Anger, a deadly game gone wrong. Kyle Anger's story is a somber tale of adolescent recklessness that spiraled into tragedy, a narrative underscoring the sometimes fatal consequences of youthful indiscretion and the fine line between thoughtless play and deadly seriousness. Anger was 18 at the time of his crime, and along with 4 others, he became embroiled in a senseless action that would lead to the untimely death of 32-year-old Kenneth White in 2017. What had begun as a misguided attempt at a prank amongst friends morphed into a criminal action with irreversible consequences. The group of teenagers decided to throw large rocks off of an overpass into the traffic below. Anger, the oldest of the group, was the one who threw the rock that
بچه‌ها این کاری بود که تو ایرانم من دیدم متاسفانه و میرفتن رو پل سنگ پرت میکردن پایین. بیا این آخر عاقبتش اینه ها، میزنید یکی میکشین ناخواسته. اون موقع دیگه نمیگن ناخواسته است، میگن با عقل خودت سنگو پرت کردی پایین قتل عام.
Struck a passenger in a van heading home from work. The rock, weighing over 6 pounds, crashed through the windshield, hitting the person in the face and chest, leading to his tragic death. The aftermath of the reckless action would be a ripple of devastation. The victim's family was left to grapple with the sudden and senseless loss of a loved one, and the community became stunned, struggling to comprehend how such a thoughtless action of teen mischief could have escalated into such a horrific outcome. For the families of everyone involved, it became a nightmare scenario, the children's futures now irrevocably altered. The legal ramifications of anger were severe. He had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and the other charges against him were dropped. His sentence, 39 months to 20 years in prison, with credit for time served. It was a reminder of the weight of his actions, a life irrevocably changed due to a moment of careless judgment. And for the others involved, the journey was equally tumultuous. Initially requesting to be tried as juveniles, their plea would be denied, and they were tried as adults due to the grave nature of the crime. The court's decision was a clear message about the seriousness with which society treats such reckless endangerment of life, regardless of the perpetrator's age. This case raises critical questions about youth behavior and accountability. How do we balance the understanding that teenagers are still developing, still learning a measure of consequence of their actions, with the need to uphold justice and grievous wrongs? It's a complex issue, one that challenges the legal and moral framework. Anger's early release from prison in January of 2021, after having served just 15 months, and the eventual release of the others would spark a debate about the effectiveness of the system. It's designed to punish and rehabilitate, or both. The boys' conduct in jail, where they reportedly stayed out of trouble and pursued education, would suggest the capacity for change. Their reintegration into society, now employed and seemingly reformed, provided a glimmer of hope that the juvenile justice system can indeed foster positive changes. Yet for the family of the victim, Kenneth White, justice feels bittersweet. The relatively light sentences for the teenagers responsible for their loved one's death bring into sharp focus the pain and loss that no family should ever have to suffer. It's a heart-rending reminder that in cases of tragic loss, there are no true winners. Everyone involved is left to navigate the aftermath of a moment that can never be undone. Kyle Anger's story and the fatal incident which he was part of are a cautionary tale about the fragility of life and the profound impact of our actions and what they can do to others. It's also a reminder to young people everywhere that what may seem like a harmless prank can have serious and life-altering consequences. For parents, educators, and communities, it underscores the importance of guiding teenagers toward responsible decision-making and understanding the gravity of their actions. In reflecting upon this tragedy, everyone is reminded of the crucial role that guidance, empathy, and accountability can play in the shaping of lives of young individuals as they navigate their challenging journey into adulthood. Philip Chisholm, a teacher's worst nightmare. Philip Chisholm's story is one of the most unsettling narratives of a student-teacher relationship gone horribly wrong. A grim reminder of the unpredictable nature of human relationship gone horribly wrong. A grim reminder of the unpredictable nature of human behavior, even in the seemingly safe confines of a school. 14-year-old Chisholm would commit a heinous action in October of 2013 that left a community in shock and disbelief. The victim was Colleen Ritzer, a 24-year-old high school math teacher known for cheerful demeanor and dedication to her students. She was the kind of teacher who went the extra mile to ensure her students excelled, a shining light in the lives of many young individuals. But on that fateful day, this light would be extinguished in the most brutal manner possible. The day began ordinarily, with Chisholm attending classes like any other, but beneath a veneer of normalcy, he was harboring dark intentions. Ritzer was unaware of the impending danger and had requested Chisholm to stay after school for extra help on an upcoming test. A seemingly routine academic interaction, yet it became anything but that. The events that unfolded next are chilling to recount. Chisholm had followed Ritzer into the school restroom armed with a box cutter, and what transpired was cold and calculated. He used a recycling bin to move her body from the school to a nearby wooded area, where he then committed further atrocities on her lifeless body. The investigation into Ritzer's disappearance would lead to the discovery of chilling evidence. Security camera footage showed Chisholm entering the school with a change of clothing and the box cutter. His preparation and premeditation were evident, painting a disturbing picture of a young mind that was plotting a heinous crime. The community's grief would be overwhelming. Ritzer was a beloved teacher, and her loss had left a void in the hearts of her students, colleagues, and family. The brutal nature of her death would be a shock to the collective conscious, prompting questions about what could drive such a young man to commit such a violent action against his teacher. Chisholm's trial would bring about some of these questions to the forefront. At the age of 14, he had been the youngest individual in Massachusetts to be tried for first-degree murder. The trial revealed a troubled young man, but did not provide any clear understanding of his motives. He would be convicted and sentenced to at least 40 years in prison, a decision reflective of the gravity of his actions, but which also raised issues about juvenile justice and the capacity for rehabilitation. The case of Philip Chisholm is not only a narrative of crime, it's a case study in the complexities of adolescent psychology. What would lead a young person to commit such an act of violence? How can schools identify and support students who may be struggling with severe mental health? Chisholm's actions would spark discussions about school safety, the relationship between teachers and students, and the need for comprehensive mental health support in an educational setting. Moreover, it highlights the vulnerabilities that teachers face in their profession. The tragedy of Colleen Ritzer's death serves as a wake-up call about the often overlooked risks that teachers take in their commitment to educating and supporting their students. Philip Chisholm's story is a tragic tale of unexplained rage, lost potential, and a community struggle to find answers in the aftermath of a senseless crime. It challenges us to look deeper into the dynamics of student-teacher relationships and the mental health of young people. In this narrative, we're confronted with the harsh reality that sometimes the greatest of dangers can lurk in the most unexpected places, and the importance of remaining vigilant to protect the sanctity of educational space. Sierra Halter, a twisted plot against a father. In April of 2021, a shocking crime emerged in Nevada that shook the community to its core. It involved Sierra Halter, a 16-year-old girl, and her then 18-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero. Their targets would be none other than Sierra's father, Daniel, who became the victim of a heinous murder that was plotted by his very own daughter and her lover. The events which led up to his death were a twisted concoction of teenage rebellion, forbidden romance, and cold-blooded murder. Sierra and Aaron, deeply in love, were faced with parental disapproval, most vehemently from Sierra's father. He had forbidden the relationship, hoping to steer his daughter away from what he saw as a destructive path. But little did he know, this intervention would have tragic consequence. The couple made a deadly decision. They planned to murder Sierra's father, a plan executed in chilling precision and brutality. The evidence uncovered later by authorities would reveal the extent of their premeditation. They had purchased a...
فقط به خاطر اینکه به دخترش گفت از این رابطه دوری کن، این رابطه آخر عاقبت خوشی نداره، این اتفاق براش افتاد. یعنی به جرم اینکه وظیفه پدرش رو انجام داد کشته شد.
Circular saw, bleach, gloves, and other implements, indicating their intent to dismember and dispose of a body. On the night of the murder, the two unleashed a fury of violence upon her father. The autopsy reports later revealed the shocking extent of his injuries, over 70 stab wounds. The couple's attempt to cover up the crime would be equally macabre. They had tried to dismember his body, an endeavor they eventually abandoned for setting the garage on fire, hoping the flames would erase their sins. But this botched plan would quickly unravel, with their crime being discovered by authorities. The use of Daniel's credit card after the crime and the purchases that they made would be the icing on the cake. The trial and sentencing of the couple were laden with emotional turmoil. Sierra, during her hearings, claimed that she had been subjected to physical and emotional abuse by her father, one that was disputed by her extended family. And Aaron expressed remorse for his actions, painting himself as a misguided teenager that was caught up in a love-driven frenzy. The impact of the crime reverberated far beyond the courtroom, leaving a scar on the community and forcing them to confront the disturbing question of how a seemingly ordinary teenager could turn into a cold-blooded killer. It also shed light on the complex dynamics of teenage relationships, parental authority, and the consequences of unchecked emotions. Sierra Halter's case serves as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the heart of a teenager and the devastating consequence that can unfold when love and rebellion take a sinister turn. The stories of these troubled teenagers and the things that they've gone through and the crimes of which they've committed forces everyone to grapple with the uncomfortable truths about the capacity for evil that can exist in even the most unexpected of places.
خب دوستای عزیز، اینجا پایان ویدیو رسیدیم. امیدوارم که از این ویدیو لذت کافی برده باشید و یه سری از مسائل این داستانم درس عبرتی شده باشه برای بعضی از جوانامون که تو عصبانیت خیلی کارا میکنن. خیلی دوستتون دارم. مثل همیشه کلام آخر که دار نیک پندار نیک گفتار نیک صلوحی زندگی هممون باشه. تا یه ویدیوی دیگه شما رو به یزدان پاک میسپارم. عشق است، ایران، ایرانی، کسایی که ایرانی ها رو دوست دارن از هر سرزمینی که هستن. به ایرانی بودن خودتون افتخار کنید. جاتون اینجاست، تاج سرید. دوستتون دارم. یاد